Let's just jump right into it. Today's title is Andrew Willson versus Dinesh D'Souza on Israel. This is my reaction to the video. So basically, this is a debate. I think it's from a couple of years ago, and I'm seeing it make traction more recently. But I just watched a clip from it because I hadn't watched it. It's about 2.5 hours. We'll just be watching clips from it. But I want to start with the video where the person says that, Dinesh D'Souza won the debate. And then we'll go from there. But I also want to show a quick clip. And it's the intro to the actual debate. So I want you to hear what Dinesh D'Souza says. Hold on one second. Okay, let me just go to this first video so I can
I've written a lot about it, and I've debated it against generally leading atheists, people like Christopher Hitchens and others. Now, Israel is not my topic. And by that, I mean in a career spanning 35 years, I haven't written about it. I barely mentioned it. I'm not known as a Zionist. I don't identify with Zionism, which was a secular socialist movement of the 19th century. I have no particular stake in Israel as a country. I'm America first all the way. And so keep those things in mind as we have this debate. If you're looking for me to sort of channel Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin, that's really not going to be happening here. I'm not a professional Israel advocate in any sense of the term. I discovered Israel really 2 or 3 years ago when I visited for the first time. And I found it interesting in 2 ways. The first one was simply that we live at a time when cities have become really homogenized. These days, there's no point going to Zurich and Copenhagen. It's all kind of one thing. Israel's not like that. In Israel, you're very conscious that you're in the land of the Bible. That is a very important feeling for Christians. You get the sense that this is your spiritual homeland.
Okay, so think about what he just said. First of all, he said that he is not a Zionist. He said Zionism is a socialist movement. This is a person that is in the support of Israel. So he says that Zionism is a socialist movement. He doesn't subscribe to it. Now, what else he just said? He just said that most major cities around the world are homogenized, meaning they all look the same. But Israel doesn't. Think about that. Think about all around the world, everybody else, homogenized cities. And when he says that, he means Western countries. They're all homogenized, but Israel isn't. So how was Israel able to keep their cities from being homogenized? How was Israel able to keep Tel Aviv from being homogenized? How was Israel able to keep, Jerusalem from being homogenized? How were they able to do it? The rest of the world, he just said, all the cities look the same through multiculturalism, through immigration. So how was Israel able to have their cities to not look like that? But nobody else is able to do it. Now, do you think these other cities wanted to be like Israel? Do you think these other cities wanted to look like they did 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago? So why wasn't any other major cities around the world in Western countries able to prevent from becoming homogenized? I'm asking the question. But Israel was able to do it. So you heard Dinesh D'Souza's stance. His stance is that he's not a Zionist. He's not very familiar with Israel, but he's going to defend Israel based on Christianity. And when I say defend Israel, I'm not saying that, because they conflate two things. So if you even decide to debate about Israel, like Andrew Willson is doing, you're automatically anti-Semitic. There's no nuance. It's just a low IQ argument. Just having a debate, you're anti-Semitism. Just asking a question, you're anti-Semitic. No matter what you do, if it's not in full agreement, it's anti-Semitism. It's all or nothing. Yet nobody will ever get on TV and explain to you what anti-Semitism is. They'll just tell you that you're anti-Semitic, which I find very interesting. Just like we've seen the term racism keep expanding and keep growing to now everything is racist. So let me go to this guy's page where he says that where is this guy's? Let me see. Let me see if I can find this guy's page. No, let me go to this one. Just let me go to my history. So this guy says that Andrew Willson won. I mean, Dinesh won. So this guy claims that Dinesh won in the very beginning of the debate. So let's see. And I love debates. I watch all the debates, and I picked this one so nobody could say I was biased, because I'm starting with the video clip of the guy saying that Dinesh D'Souza completely obliterates Andrew Willson. So we're going to start with that one. Make sure y'all got me on. Okay, let's go.
They were the very first Judeo-Christian. Christianity came right out of that. In fact, the first historical kinship or line of continuity. It now makes sense. You can debate the miracles, you can debate the theology, but that these things are real, these people are real, the events are real, has been authenticated down to the most excruciating detail. That's very important because it also happens to establish the presence of the Jews in their ancestral homeland. And in a way, to me, the fundamental question that we're discussing today, when I say morally obligated, what I really mean is, what's the right thing to do? Now, saying what the right thing to do doesn't solve the problem of should we give money to Israel or how much money should we give to Israel? No, supporting Israel here basically means having a certain recognition of a kind of spiritual and historical kinship or line of continuity established, by the way, in the Bible. And don't think of the Old Testament as Jewish. The New Testament is just as Jewish as the Old. Both are describing Jewish communities, and Christianity came right out of that. In fact, the first Christians were Jews. They were Jews who followed the Messiah. I think historically we could say with great accuracy they were the very first Judeo-Christians.
So what he's saying is, and this is to me up for debate, whether or not the actual people that we see as Jews today actually descended from Abraham. I think, in my just my opinion, it's almost impossible. So I look at this two ways. To me, it would be almost impossible to say that this person, let's just say Ben Shapiro, that Ben Shapiro can trace his lineage back to Abraham. I just don't believe that. Then the second thing is, if we talk about Semitic and who's Shemitic and who's not, we have to agree that there are roughly 16 million Jews in the world there are more people in the world that have Shemitic blood than just those 16 million. That's just common sense, because it was so much conquering and moving. The 12. It's just a lot that happened thousands of years ago, just to say that only these groups of people are this. I don't know. This is my opinion. But I just don't believe that you can say that Ben Shapiro traces himself all the way back to Abraham or Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't believe that. Just like I wouldn't believe that you could trace my lineage all the way back to whatever. I just don't believe it. And the Israeli government does not recognize DNA testing outside of what they provide. They don't. That's the truth. They don't accept it. So they don't even allow a second opinion or other opinions on DNA, etc. But at the end of the day, we can all agree that Semitic people, if we were just using common sense, would probably be in the billions around the world. To say that it's just 16 million people is just insane. I don't believe that. But Dinesh D'Souza is saying basically that these people in the land of Israel today descend back to Abraham. Now, keep in mind, I said this before, Abraham had brothers that had children. So Abraham's lineage is not just him, he has a family. So are they Semitic too? And if they're not Semitic, then that means Semitic blood doesn't mean anything. That means Abraham is special because of the covenant that he made with God. In other words, because Abraham had faith in God, that's why his seed is special. Not because he's quote unquote Hebrew or whatever you want to call it, because the word Jew comes from the tribe of Judah, but he isn't special because of blood. And Andrew Willson will talk about this magic Jew blood. He's special because of faith. So we see that the lineage of Christ came from Abraham because Abraham had faith. This is not about actual DNA more than it is about Abraham having faith in God. And God, if you notice in the Bible, God has man do it first, and then God will do it because man has to qualify for what God has. So Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, which qualified God to sacrifice himself to the world. Anyway, I'm starting with this video, though, of this guy saying that Andrew Willson got obliterated. So we're going to start with this one. We're going to keep moving. Tanya said you need a court order. I guess you're talking about the DNA test. I read something where they want to acknowledge anything that's outside of the government providing that test. The theological handyman said the first Hebrew was a Gentile. Who was the first Hebrew? Was it Adam? Well, let's continue.
The apostles were Judeo-Christians. Now, to me, the core of this question is whose land is it?
30 seconds.
30 seconds? I was just getting warned. This is my introduction, guys. All right. Let me just put it this way. There are three ways to get a country. First, you were there first. That's the ancestral claim. Number two, you got the country by some kind of negotiation or treaty. Or number three, you got the land because you captured it. Every single country on the map in the world now has gotten its claim based on one of these three ways.
Could I argue, if that's the case, could I argue, this is an argument, so if we go by the ancestral claim to the land, does that mean Native Americans own America? Or they might say the indigenous Black people, do they own America? First thing, does a person being born in a land automatically grant them the rights to the land? Second question is, if it's by some kind of treaty or whatever, but if there's a treaty, in my opinion, if we have a treaty and agreement, both sides have to agree. Just hear me out for a second. In America, the Native Americans and the Anglo-Saxons had treaties with each other, so they both sides agreed. In this Israel situation, both sides didn't agree. The West, Europe or England and America agreed with Israel, but that's a one-sided treaty because technically a treaty should have been between Palestine and Israel. They didn't accept the treaty. So we got two things don't apply so far. Number one, ancestral ties to the land don't grant you ownership. And two, a treaty between two parties has to be between the two parties that want the land. We can't just say a treaty between us and then but the land's with them. Come on, it don't make any sense. And then the third thing is by conquering. So I want to see where he wants to go with this. I just wanted to preface what he just said, that those are the three ways. So let's go with so ancestral claims, you can't use that argument. Treaty, you can't use that argument. So now we have the wars fought over the land.
The argument I'm going to make is that Israel succeeds on all three ways. It checks all the boxes. Even America doesn't. The American Indians were here first. We might have conquered them, taken the land from them, so we got it by conquest. They got it by original inhabitancy. And there's a little bit of an argument over here, but I'm going to argue that the Jews were there. It's their land. Number two, they got it by treaty. It was given to them by the United Nations. They accepted it. The Palestinians rejected it. And three, they got it by not just by conquest, they fought 3 defensive wars against massive coalitions of Islamic forces.
Tanya says, and the stuff called treaty specifically said that they were not to disrupt the Arabs living there during that time. And so I always want to look at the treaty, but if that is true, that's a very big deal if they were not to disrupt people that are already living there.
That are into essentially global colonization. The Muslims are the real colonizers. And so whichever box you choose, Israel succeeds. And therefore, supporting Israel isn't just sort of the biblical thing to do, it's the right thing to do. Thank you very much.
I want for everybody to remember that the topic of this debate is if Christians have a moral obligation to support Jews in Israel.
Keep in mind, just by asking the question, he's anti-Semitic. I'm just by asking the question, that's why I said that term anti-Semitism is just a low IQ statement, because you can't even question. You can't even, it's just crazy. But let's continue.
He didn't give us one. It is obvious to me that since the answer is clearly no, that Dinesh likely gave no reason, which means I predicted he wouldn't give us one. I will begin by expressing to you, the audience, that when discussing normative claims, or in this case, moral claims, you need to demonstrate why the moral obligation is there. Dinesh's view comes down to a whole bunch of really stupid propositions that actually make no sense. Note, I'm not calling Dinesh stupid. He's far from it. But even intelligent people can believe stupid propositions and often do. Logical proposition 1, Christians need to support a Jewish state of Israel because their ethics and Christian ethics overlap. This is something which Dinesh has said multiple times. The reason this is a stupid proposition is because the modern state of Israel is a secular state. This state supports abortion, and most of the public supports it. They have pregnancy termination boards, which grant 99% of applications abortions up to 24 weeks and beyond. They support gay marriage, and while not marrying gays themselves, as there is no civil marriage authority, they recognize all out-of-country gay marriages as valid, and all gay cohabitation has identical social and financial rights. Let that sink in.
So someone said in the comments, the Christians fought those wars. Are you talking about the Crusades? So yes. So I guess the argument is, and this is the argument, right? And I think somebody said this. Somebody said, I don't remember who it was, but they said, if you can't, I want to say it was who's the guy that I think he's the guy that does What is a Woman? that guy, I forgot his name right now. I can't think of his name. But I think he's the one that said it. Don't quote me though of him saying it, but I think it was him. It was him talking with Tucker Carlson. But he said, if you cannot defend your country, then you don't have a country. And I believe that. If you can't defend your land, then you don't have land. If you can't defend you don't have a country. So in other words, if the Jews can't defend Israel, meaning they can't do it by themselves, then they don't really own the land. But to me, that gives credence to, if God will not allow you to keep the land, meaning that God will not step in and allow you to keep that land, then wouldn't it be fair to say that God doesn't want you to have the land? Because to me, the consequence of disobedience, thank you, Matt Walsh, the consequence of disobedience would, think about it. If you were rejecting Christ, what would be the penalty? What would be the consequence? Think about it, like, because the whole thing is Jews deserve the land because they're God's chosen people. Okay, so what would be a consequence of Jewish people rejecting Christ, which is rejecting God? What would be the consequence? If the biggest prize is the land, then in my opinion, wouldn't the consequence be you don't get the land? Because even God would say, go in there and possess the land, that still requires faith. So my question is that if the land is the subject of this discussion, what would be a punishment of the people that said, we are chosen by God, but we reject God? What would be the punishment? But let's continue. And I know my questioning, asking these questions, making these statements makes me anti-Semitic. Even though half the time you can't tell who was Jewish or what, you can't tell, because anyway.
They are extremely pro-transgender, and their public health care system provides generously for trans surgery and voice mod training. Sorry about that. 1 second here. Problems, and that's truest of holies. Position 3, Dinesh often cites the biblical.
What if you could make a song using only your voice? Let's start with the drums.
Principle of those who bless Israel will be blessed. That's Genesis 12:3. Does the modern state of Israel seem very blessed to you? If you took every Jew in Israel and put them in Germany in the year 2026, they would be safer than they are in Israel. How's that for irony? So when you say the ideology of Islam, you don't believe Arabs are evil, right?
No.
You believe Islam, the ideology is evil, right?
Right.
Okay, Jews, from my perspective, that ideology is also evil.
Right, but I think we're talking about evil in two completely different senses. There is a sense in which heresy is evil, right? Because it departs from the theological straight path. In fact, orthodoxy means a straight path. Heresy means a deviation.
Sure.
We're talking about evil in a more natural law sense, by which I mean
I don't believe in natural law.
You don't believe in natural law?
No.
Okay. Do you believe in the Ten Commandments?
I'm not a natural law proponent because I'm not a Catholic. Sure, the 10 Commandments are fine.
Do you believe that do you believe that to take a 5-year-old kid and forcibly transition that kid is evil?
Of course.
Okay. Now, is that the same as the kind of evil that you were describing when you were talking about Christian heresy? I mean, in other words, Judaism is a heresy, and that's one type of evil. I'm saying there's another type of evil.
I just want to make sure
murder is evil.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I got it right. So when you're making the differentiation, you're saying this is evil, and this is evil, and this is a lesser evil than this one.
I'm saying that this is a force for good in combating this evil.
Yeah, but you're still saying both are evil.
Well,
if you're saying both are evils, you want us to support the lesser evil.
Well, I certainly do believe that. There are many cases of supporting the lesser evil. But then
aren't you admitting Jewish ideology is evil?
Well, I'm admitting that Jewish theology is a heresy, or at least
is evil.
It's evil in its rejection of Christianity. I agree with that.
So Dinesh D'Souza just said, this is what he just said. He just said that the ideology of Islam is evil, and the heresy of Judaism is also evil. But the Islamic evil is worse than the Jewish or Judaism evil. This is a very intelligent man. He just said the lesser of two evils. Now, we know the lesser of two evils is an idiotic thing to even believe because evil is evil. No, evil is evil. So we're talking about evil. Either a person's evil or they're not. So if a person was a serial killer and they killed 30 people versus one, I'm not going to say that one is good and one, they both evil. So to say that the Islamic ideology is evil and the Judaic ideology is evil, but I'm going to pick the Judaic one is kind of a hypocrisy. They're both evil because it's a rejection of Christ. Now I'm speaking in accordance to this argument of Dinesh D'Souza is arguing for the Christian moral, I guess, edict to support the Jews. So he's speaking from a Christian. So from a Christian perspective, he just said that he can separate this evil from that evil. Now, I don't know if you all agree with that, but I don't agree with that. If you call it something evil and something else evil, then they're both evil.
Theologically,
Perfect.
of course, but that's,
So you're just saying support evil to stop evil.
No.
Support evil and to stop evil. Perfect.
So the man who insisted that Israel is a secular state makes a convenient switcheroo and is now making Israel a theological state, which is out of sync with Christianity. Go one way or the other. You're trapped on your own.
Actually, perfect. I love this trap.
Okay.
Is secular ethics evil?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, shit. You got me.
Wow. We have had secular ethics in the world for about 500 years at
evil.
least.
Right?
And we have secular ethics that dominate this country right now. Would you say that the United States right now is evil?
I would say that the secularists who are in charge of it are fucking evil.
Okay. But
you saw what he did? So what he tried to do right there is he tries, and this is what happens a lot, where they conflate Western culture to good, and then everything else is bad. So Western culture has the moral hierarchy over, let's say, an Islamic country or a communist country or whatever. This is the argument. So you heard what he just said. He says, you're saying that the United States is evil. Andrew specified and said, the people that run it are definitely evil. That's what he's saying. He's not saying the United States itself is evil. The people that run the United States are evil. And that is a good contextual distinction. That is a good distinction. Just because a country is a Western country doesn't mean they're automatically good. I would argue that most Western countries are being conquered through multiculturalism and immigration because they are immoral. The whole notion of we have to let everybody in and we got to be, the whole liberal ideology, in my opinion, is wicked and evil. So to even subscribe to most of this, like the Moroccans invading Spain, you have to have a compromised character to allow that to happen in the first place. Because there's no way, because to me, for you to be a person of character, and for you to be morally right, you're going to have to make very tough decisions. That are going to have a lot of people that are going to be upset. Most of the time, when you do the right thing, most folks not going to like it. The right thing isn't like most people think. So somebody might say, a woman's body is her choice. That sounds very noble, but the premise behind it is very evil and wicked. I would say they should outlaw abortion, period. Then I sound like the bad guy. You see how when you really have a moral stance, you pretty much be rejected by the world because most of the world believes that a woman should be able to do what she wants to do. Well, I take that back. Most of the Western world believes that.
Evil fucking bastards.
But notice that when it comes to Israel, you foist the evil on the nation.
Oh,
when
no.
it comes to America, you're pro-American, your 4th of July, your 250th anniversary, you're America, rah, 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 but there are these bad secular people in the country. You're against them, but you're not anti-American, are you?
Perfect. Let's use this
Are you?
exact same analogy.
Okay.
We'll use the exact same analogy back the other way. Right here in the United States, there's tons and tons and tons of Christians. They're not evil, right? We don't consider them evil.
It's a very big world, and there are in it.
You see how this guy cut Andrew Wilson's, just cut him off? You see it? Boy, listen, boy, that's good.
Buddhists, Confucians, Taoists, Jews, Muslims. The fact that they are not on board with us theologically is one thing. It says that we need to promote the Great Commission, we need to promote the gospel, we need to support missionary efforts throughout the world. I don't disagree with any of this. But this is being deployed in a kind of brutish fashion to somehow imply that Judaism is different than any. We make allies with countries all the time. We have common cause all the time that lasts for decades, sometimes centuries. We have special relationships with countries for good reason. We support, and we should support, South Korea against North Korea. That's why South Korea is a prosperous Western society. Now, maybe they allow a pride parade, but they are nevertheless a much...
South Korea, we support South Korea against North Korea, but I guarantee that North Korea doesn't have a birth rate problem, do they? South Korea has a birth rate, but this is what I mean by South Korea, just as a nation itself, is not going to be conservative. It's going to be liberal. We keep saying we want to support these countries against Islam, but these countries are suffering from their own damnation. Let's preserve these nations from Islam. Meanwhile, they don't want to have any more children. They want things to be LGBTQ. They want to transition children. So what are you actually protecting these Western countries from? Think about what I'm saying. Think about what I'm saying. And I'm not in no way, shape, nor form trying to say that I support Islam. I'm simply saying that the notion is that we are protecting the world from Islam, which means we are protecting the world from protecting Western nations from Islam. But these Western nations are destroying themselves. So what are we protecting them from? Because it sounds like to me, we don't want the Muslims to do it. We'll do it ourselves. That's what it sounds like.
Preferable moral alternative to North Korea.
30 seconds.
The Jews are basically the good people in a really bad neighborhood made up of really bad people who wish us evil no less than them. Right there is a link, and this is not even considering the historical, the religious, the civilizational, the Athens and Jerusalem, the fact that our own heritage is inconceivable without the Old Testament no less than the New. We are linked historically, morally, and it so happens to be that there is a current serious threat, in some ways greater than threats we faced before.
10
and it's a
seconds.
threat faced not just by America, it's a threat faced by Christianity, because the Islamic project is a religious project. It is the first totalitarian religious project in world history.
And
We've had other totalitarianisms, but not based on
time.
religion.
So my question, Mr. Dinesh D'Souza, is how is Islam able to infect all these other countries, but not infect Israel? It doesn't make any sense. Because the argument is that Islam is such a great threat, but somehow, some way, this great threat is able to infiltrate all the Western nations. Why is it not able to infiltrate Israel? So you mean to tell me the Western nations protecting Israel are being infected by the Muslims? Let's just say, for lack of better words, the Muslims are taking over Western countries. Those Western countries don't care about their own safety from Islam, but they care about making sure that the Jews are not infected by Islam or Israel isn't conquered by the Muslims. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Donna Aldor said, Judge Judy said, when it doesn't make sense, it's not true. Yeah, because God's not the author of confusion. God is not the author of confusion. But I just think it's quite ridiculous that these Western countries are standing with Israel and fighting for Israel, but their country is being overran by the same enemy they're protecting Israel from. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. My boy said he went to London last year and said it was all he saw was all Muslim. So my question is, how is England fighting for Israel to protect them from the Muslims, but their own country is being conquered by the Muslims? It doesn't make any sense. Either this great Islamic threat really doesn't exist, or these Western nations are stupid. Which one is it? Which one is it? You're trying to convince me that Islam is such a great threat. And keep in mind, I am not a supporter or whatever of Islam. I'm saying that these Western nations are telling the world that Islam is a threat, but yet their country is filled with Muslims. Simultaneously, they're saying that Islam is a threat to the Jews, but Israel somehow manages to not have their country flooded with Islam. Just make it make sense, because it doesn't make any sense. Either Islam is not that dangerous, or the Western countries are just stupid. Because it don't make any sense to me. You're protecting Israel from something that you're welcoming in your country. It does not make any sense. It just don't make any sense. We're in America right now. I live in Atlanta. There's mosques everywhere. There's Muslim businesses, mosques, communities everywhere in Atlanta. Everywhere. So I want you to think about how they're everywhere in Atlanta, but they aren't anywhere in Israel. Just make that make sense. And we're protecting Israel from the Muslims. This is what I mean. This whole Zionism support, it's really a low IQ thing, because once you start chopping it up and dissecting it, you see it don't make any sense. It don't make any sense. Tierra said it's both at the same time. Janan TV said, Blanche, the West is compromised. They are emptying out the Middle East of all of these radicals. Okay. Another statement I have. If I ask the average Muslim, do they agree with radical Islam? They're going to say no. They're going to say no. So how are you determining who's the bad Muslim, who's the good Muslim? How are you determining this? And I'm asking these questions because this whole thing is about Israel being protected from Islam. That's what all this is about. Israel needs to be protected from Islam. So if that's the case, then how are we justifying Islam everywhere else in the world? I'm just asking questions. I'm not trying to be anti-Shemitic. I'm just asking questions.
We're dealing with one. And what we've had this whole debate is a pretense that somehow there's no fundamental difference between the Islamic project and the Jewish project. And all of this nonsense about the fact that somehow Israel is just as evil arises out of that.
EVE Online is a So I don't know if you remember one of the first things that Dinesh said when he started this video, which is that he only discovered Israel 2 or 3 years ago when he went there and he saw it with his own eyes, boots on the ground, feet on the Israeli soil to witness and understand what is going on. Before that point, before he went there, before he discovered Israel, he didn't spend his time dedicating his day-to-day advocating on behalf of the Israeli people, the IDF, Zionism, Jews, relentlessly getting paid to do it, making it sort of a religion for himself, because he didn't have the validity to be able to talk about it because he had never been there before. It's rooted in truth of being able to go to a place in the world, being able to understand the boots on the ground reality so you can be an accurate reporter. This moment immediately reminded me of the Dave Smith, Douglas Murray, Joe Rogan moment, where Douglas realized that Dave Smith had never been to Israel or the region his whole life and still hasn't. But Dave Smith has made a career for himself, being on some of the biggest podcasts and stages in the world, claiming he doesn't claim it, but he indirectly claimed it given the deep rooted belief systems that he's so convinced of.
So he says that what Dinesh D'Souza said, now think about it. So he says Andrew Willson got obliterated in the debate because Dinesh D'Souza went to Israel. And Dinesh D'Souza going to Israel only proves the point that Israel isn't overran by Islam. Israel has been able to preserve their culture. That's all he said. He said when he went there, you can tell you're in the, I guess, holy lands or biblical lands or whatever, but that's what he said. So how does that invalidate? How do those things invalidate what Andrew Willson is saying? I keep telling you all that when you listen to these people, it's really a low IQ, low hanging fruit argument. Do I have to go to North Korea to tell you that it's communist? Do I have to go to North Korea to tell you that it's a communist country? So am I going to go to North Korea, go there and say, you know what? Not as bad as they say. Actually, I want to live here. Do I have to go to New York to know that it's liberal and woke? Do I have to go to LA to know that it's liberal and woke? I'm asking, do I have to go to a place to be able to speak on it? As if going to the place is going to change my mind. I remember Officer Tatum said that when he went to Israel, he just trivialized it. He said the only thing we went through was a child spit on one of the pastors. He said that's all we experienced. Hey Mike, I'm gonna be there in about 12. I gotta go pick my car up. You got me, Mike? I gotta pick my other car up and bring it over there. The Chrysler. I gotta pick the car up because it's over in Alpharetta. No, it's in Roswell. Okay, I'll be there. I forgot what I was saying. Can y'all hear me on Instagram? I forgot what I was saying, but anyway, my point was that Officer Tatum said that he went to Israel and he said the only thing that happened was a little child spit on the pastor. And I thought to myself, think about a child spitting on a pastor. Think about what that child has seen. Think about a child, a small child spitting on a pastor. What does that tell you? That tells you that that child thought that was normal. That child thought, and the child was able to even see the difference between a pastor, a Christian pastor, and a Jewish person. That child was able to decipher the difference. So that means that child had enough experience to know that these are pastors that are Christian from America. These are Jews. We can spit on them. So that little child had to have seen adults do that. A child spit on a random adult. That means that child was comfortable. That means that's a part of the culture that's there. So this guy saying that Dinesh D'Souza went there, but when he went there, what did he discover? He said what he saw. He said, you feel like you're in the air in the Holy Lands, or you feel like you're in the biblical place. You feel it. He never said anything about Jews being chosen. He never said anything about supporting. He just said what it felt like is him as a Christian there. But does that invalidate what Andrew Willson is saying? I don't think it does.
About Israel, Palestine, the region, without ever having seen it for himself. And from the jump, that is why I receive credibility from people who have been there. And then you have to say, well, I live here myself. So how can I use my discernment to be able to say, is what they're saying an accurate representation of the truth? And this is why speaking to people who have been there, who are on the ground, will always be forever, in my opinion, breaking news. That's literally how I see it. Thank you so much.
So do you think this guy, if I went to Israel and I had the same feelings, do you think he would say, okay, you're valid? If I went to Israel, and I actually want to go to Israel one day, but if I went on my own terms, because I don't want to go, I want to go to Israel on my own terms to see how things really work. I don't want to go with no sanctioned group. I don't want to go with when they can set it up. I want to go off the cuff on my own, pop up randomly in Israel, and then let me get my view. Not me go with sanctioned groups and we got such and such coming, roll out the red carpet, put away this, now. I want to just pop up and see what happens then. But if I went to Israel, not on a sanctioned visit, on my own, and I had the same views, do you think this guy's going to say my points are valid? Of course not. He's going to say the fact that I went to Israel and still feel the same way, you must be an anti-Semite. That's what he's going to say. His point is invalid. Dinesh D'Souza did not obliterate Andrew Willson. This is insanity. But let's continue. Let's continue. Let me find. I had my. Let me play this one real quick. I'm trying to get to the video I had. Let me go back. Let me go to my video. Let me go to my history. one thing I love about the Bible and what you would call Christian religion is, well, I prefer the word believers, but what I love about it is that believers are required to love everybody. And I don't know if any other religion operates that way, where you're required to love your enemies. In fact, Christianity gets demonized for having that tenet to love your enemies. You know, people make a mockery out of turn the other cheek, which is that is grossly taken out of context. But anyway, let's continue. I just think it's funny that, you know, believers get accused of all these things, but we're literally required to love our enemies and love our neighbors as ourselves. Like, it's just, I don't know. I've never met a Jewish person that agreed with that. So for them to be talking about anti-Semitism, I'm like, it don't make any sense. As a believer, you can't be anti anything, not anti a person. You can be anti-sin.
So the man who insisted that Israel is a secular state makes a convenient switcheroo and is now making Israel a theological state, which is out of sync with Christianity. Go one way or the other. You're trapped on your own.
Actually, perfect. I love this trap.
Okay.
Is secular ethics evil?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, shit. You got me. Ah.
Wow. Do you agree that the people who live in Israel are Jews?
Yes. Mystery
Okay.
solved.
Okay. And all right. And do you also agree that they are directly in the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? In other words, they come in a sort of historical, religious, and ancestral line from the old Jews. In other words, what I'm saying is,
You mean that particular tribe coming off the 12 tribes, it can be traced back?
I'm simply saying that there's a line of continuity in the same way that there's a line of continuity.
I agree. Do you agree
Okay.
that that's the case with Palestinians as well? They come
No.
from the same?
No.
No.
Let's take, for example,
Even though
Gaza.
ancestral DNA points us out.
No, it doesn't.
It
Let's look at Gaza, for example, which is the heart of our debate.
This is what he
Line of
said.
continuity-
I agree. Do you agree
Okay.
that that's the case with Palestinians as well? They come
No.
from the same?
No.
No.
Let's take, for example,
Even though
Gaza.
ancestral DNA points us out.
No, it doesn't.
It
Let's look at Gaza, for example, which
So Dinesh D'Souza said, now think about this. Now he said, Andrew Willson said, well, the Palestinians' DNA points to the same thing. And Dinesh D'Souza said, no, it doesn't. So he said, and this is what I mean. We're talking about these people saying that I can trace my lineage back to Abraham. I don't know. I'm sorry. Black people would have a hard time tracing their ancestry back to slavery, which ain't 1,000 years ago. Black people in America would have a difficult time trying to trace their lineage back to a country in Africa. They would have a very, very, very difficult time. But you're convincing me that 16 million Jews in the world were able to trace their lineage back to Abraham, and nobody else in the world has any lineage to Abraham. That's tough. That's tough. That's tough. You mean to tell me somebody that looks white? Let me take a low-hanging fruit. You got a person that looks white, and you got a person that looks Arab, and you're telling me the person that looks white traces back to Abraham, and the person that looks Arab traces back to who? I don't know. I'm just asking questions. I'm not trying to be anti-Semitic. I'm just asking questions.
is the heart of our debate, Gaza.
It's
Gaza-
definitely not the heart of our debate.
Big brain, no pain. I don't even gotta try. Make a million
This is how I
while sleep.
created a
just
high
laugh.
quality music video in just one.
Well, I mean, the Palestinian debate. The Palestinian debate right now is not about the West Bank. It's about Gaza. That's where okay.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is that historically, the people who lived in Gaza are not Palestinians. It is a fakery of the name through history that we call them Palestinians. The people who lived in Gaza were the Philistines. The Philistines were Europeans. They came from Greece. They came from Cyprus. This is archaeologically definitively established.
Are
And
they
so,
close? Are they more closely related than like Ashkenazi Jews are to the historic people of Israel?
the Philistines have vanished off the pages of history.
That's not the
Philistines-
question that I asked you.
What is your question?
Mike, the question that I asked you is, would it be the case that the modern Palestinian people would have more ancestry in common with the Jews who currently live in Israel than an Ashkenazi Jew would?
This is a little bit debatable because some of the people who are from that region
It's a
of
little bit
Canaan-
debatable,
No,
huh?
well, here's what I'm saying. If
Okay.
you're making it sound like it is 100% of a genetic argument,
Can you
but
answer the question I asked you without obfuscation? Is it the case or not that Ashkenazi Jews generally have less shared ancestry than Palestinians do with the current Jewish population of Israel?
and I'm
Isn't
saying
that in fact the case? No, they don't have as much shared ancestry as the Palestinians do who currently live inside of Gaza with the Jews who currently live in Israel. Isn't it true Ashkenazis don't have as much ancestry?
yeah, but Judaism, hold on. Judaism is a combination. You're acting as if Judaism is purely a function of genetics.
You hear what he just said? He just said, you're acting as if Judaism is purely a function of genetics. When they call themselves God chosen people, that's what they're talking about. So if I convert to Judaism tomorrow, I'm not going to be considered chosen. We all know this. So if I wouldn't be considered chosen, then clearly it is about genetics. It's not about anything but that. If it wasn't the case, then them being descended from Abraham wouldn't even matter. It only matters because they're saying that we have the blood of Abraham flowing through us. That's why we're the chosen people. If what Dinesh D'Souza is saying is true, then I could be converted to Judaism tomorrow, and I would be a chosen people. I'd be a Jew. That's not the case. You know it, and I know it. It is all about DNA, genetic lineage, etc.
Judaism is a function of genetics plus
you-
history
Okay.
plus religious devotion.
No,
so
Dinesh,
that's what
you
makes
were
a
making
Jew-
that argument because you were making it an argument based on continuity.
If Jews are
But if you
thrown
say the
out-
continuity gets broken, the second it is that we have Ashkenazi Jews who still have the right of return to Israel, but though it is the case that they are now outside of that continuity, Dinesh, now outside of that people group, Dinesh.
You see, he got him right here because Dinesh said the Philistines were from Greek. They're from Crete. So Dinesh D'Souza is saying that the Philistines aren't Jewish. Then he says the Palestinians don't have a lineage. They aren't Semites either. So he made clear distinctions on, he separated the Jews from the Palestinians and the Philistines, which means he's saying they're separated based on genetics, DNA. So Andrew Willson says, okay, well, the Ashkenazi Jews have less ancestry than the Jews that are there and the Palestinians. So how do they get claim to the land? The Ashkenazis got less than the Jews that are there and the Palestinians. How do they get claim to the land? So Denise is going to say, well, not just genetics now it's religion, now it's all this other stuff. Andrew Willson just got him. He just destroyed him right here. He just destroyed him right here.
Yeah, and let's look at why they're outside. The Jews are forcibly ejected from their homeland. They scatter all over the world. Unsurprisingly, they settle in London, they settle in Europe, they settle in Africa, they settle in Asia, but they never relinquished their claim to the land. If they had said, all right, we're out of here, you could then say, all right, other people can wander in, can claim it's theirs. The Jews never gave it up. They were thrown out. Of course, when they settled elsewhere,
And what
there
is
was some,
your-
hold on, there
Okay.
was some intermarriage. There was some imports to Judaism by people who converted in, some people converted out. But the Jewish community as a tribe and as a community remained solidly intact through the centuries. I mean, just read.
Wait, hang on. You're making continuity argument, then breaking continuity. You're making a blood and soil argument, then breaking the idea of blood and soil.
Hold on, let me make his point.
You mentioned in the beginning the right of conquest, which is your third criteria. Then you say the Jews got thrown out of Israel, which means somebody else had conquest. That's how they got the land, right?
That's right.
So that's a legitimate way to get the land, right?
That's right. And it was
Okay.
legitimate to take it back by the Crusades. So using the conquest ethic, I agree. The Ottomans captured the land
Okay.
and ruled it for a long time. The Ottomans lost World War II. And so by the same ethic of conquest, they were displaced and it became part of the British mandate. And then the UN basically proposed a partition for the... Now, the point
Hang on,
is
I'm
this.
willing to agree to these facts.
Yeah, with any...
I'm not sure how we get to the ought, though. When do we get to the ought?
Well, when we say we get to the ought, as Christians, we're trying to do what's right. We're trying to support the people who are on the right side of the issue. And
Well,
you
I
seem
don't
to be
know.
saying...
Hang on. When you say Christians, they have to support what's right.
Yeah.
How do Christians know what's right?
Well, okay. Well, in looking at what's right, we look at historical arguments, moral arguments,
Christian ethics?
spiritual continuity, shared moral principles. We also look at the fact that America is a force for good or on the good side in the world, and therefore there are bad guys trying to do us in, and their allies are going to be people that we oppose.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with you in a secular sense that those can be reasons.
Right, but secular
hang on,
reasons...
but you're a Christian. We're talking about whether or not Christians have a moral ought.
Well,
What is
Christians
the
are also...
specific moral ought a Christian has based on Christian ethics, our paradigm, our worldview, not the secular lens, not the secular view, the Christian view? Why do we have to support a Jewish state that could name Antichrist? Why?
Because, first of all, you can't make up your mind if it's a Jewish state or a secular state. You alternate both based on
Ethnically
convenience.
Jewish,
In fact, you alternate it within the same
ethnically Jewish.
sentence.
Hang on, ethnic. Don't equivocate. This is pure
Are they-
equivocation. Do you agree with me that there's ethnic Jews and then there are religious Jews?
I agree with that.
Then don't equivocate and say you can't figure out if it's a Jewish state or a secular state, because Dinesh, it can be a secular Jewish state, can't it?
Israel was
Can it be a secular Jewish state, Dinesh?
Israel
Can
was
it be a secular Jewish state, Dinesh?
Israel.
Can it be a secular
Yes,
Jewish state?
it is.
Thank you.
Okay, but I've never denied it's a secular
You
Jewish
just
state.
got done lecturing me
said-
about how I called it a Jewish state, then a secular state.
Right,
Like that
because
was a
I think
contradiction.
on the one hand, I think you're trying to appeal to anti-Jewish sentiment, and for
Oh
that,
no,
you need,
anti-Semite.
for that, you need the Jewish label.
Anti-Semite.
Now, you see what just happened? Dinesh D'Souza is losing the debate, and he immediately goes to anti-Semitism. Andrew Willson asked him a specific question: why do Christians have to support Israel? Based on what? He's not saying from a secular argument, because secular argument could be, people always say, well, you know, they're helping us fight against Islam. We get intelligence from them, just all this other stuff for a secular argument. But Andrew Willson is specifically asking, why do Christians need to support Israel? That's what he's asking. And again, even the question itself, they try to conflate with, you don't want Israel to exist, you want Jews to be extinct. That's stupid. Nobody's saying that. The question is asked, show me biblically where Christians have to support Israel. That is a basic question. It's a simple question. Dinesh D'Souza is bringing up everything else except the reasons why a Christian should support Israel. It's not a secular argument. And Andrew is saying that you're asking Christians to support a nation that is secular based on the fact that this nation is Jewish. He says, okay, well, what's the biblical backing for that? That's the question he's asking.
If Israel was truly a secular state, a lot of your antagonism would be diminished. I noticed, for example, you don't have the same hostility to Great Britain. right? Why not? They're a secular state, but they don't have the Jewish label, so you don't get excited. What I'm getting at here is
hang on. You're saying that
I'm saying that.
Can you explain to me just real quick?
Yeah.
Does England, by chance, is there a possibility that they're going to name Antichrist in my lifetime, Dinesh?
What do you mean by name Antichrist? What are you talking
I'm
about?
not talking about naming the Antichrist, but if Jews get together inside of Israel and they name a Messiah, is that going to be Jesus Christ?
Israel is not going to get together and name a Messiah.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
You're saying
First of all, you just said 1 minute ago they're a secular state. Now you go, what if a secular state names a Messiah?
Okay. Inside of Israel, do you agree with me that you have the Temple Institute and you have many Jewish organizations that are indeed willing and support the naming of a new Messiah?
There are messianic communities, apocalyptic Jewish messianic communities that believe that the rebuilding of the temple is a prelude to the end times. So what?
And no, that's not what I asked you.
Yeah,
I asked you if it is the case that if these right-wing elements inside of Israel, this would be more the right that is doing this than the left-wing elements, which are there, which are more secular. If they get together and they do name an Antichrist, or I'm sorry, a Messiah, would that Messiah necessarily be Antichrist? Not the Antichrist, but antithetical to Christ because it's a false Messiah.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Then we have established that right now. By the way, do you know how big this movement is in Israel? Could you point, for instance, to England and say 30% of the population wants to name a new Messiah? No. And by the way, hang on, I just want to point something else out. When you talk about this,
I just looked this up real quick. While an exact head count does not exist, public opinion polls show that roughly 30 to 64% of Israel Jews express a desire to see the temple in Jerusalem rebuilt. So that's 30 to 64%. World Jewish Congress stated that 64% of Israel Jews were in favor of rebuilding the temple. Some says the Hertz or Harats, they say 30%. Another one says 31 to 47%. So we'll take the low number. So let's just say a third of Jews in Israel are in favor of rebuilding a temple, are in favor of a Messiah. So a third. I'm just curious as to, let's say Israel names a Messiah. I'm curious as to how the Zionists and the supporters are going to respond to that. I guarantee if this happens, which I believe it will, that the people talking all this Christ stuff are not going to reject that the person they name is the Messiah. I guarantee it. They're not going to do it. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. I guarantee they don't. I guarantee if they name a Messiah, that these quote unquote Christians are not going to say we reject that person. They're not going to do it. I know they're not, because you'll be anti-Semitic to do so.
Say anti-Semitism. It's the opposite. I'm telling you right now, Jews are safer outside of Israel than inside of Israel. And you know that that's true. Can you explain to me how it's anti-Semitic for me to point out, using logic, what's obvious to everybody?
And this is, I think, something that's a little hard for us to accept, but it makes a lot of sense. The Israelis know how to fight Islam and radical Islam in a way that we don't. Our record in fighting radical Islam is abysmal.
So is theirs.
Their record in fighting radical Islam is outstanding.
It is, isn't it?
And in fact, all the things that
so they wouldn't need our help with that then, would they? They wouldn't need the help of this nation that's just terrible at fighting these crazy Islamists. They're so good at it, right?
Okay, let me put it this way.
Do they need our help?
Our debate has nothing to do with giving money to Israel or arms to Israel. Let me ask you this.
Well, then what are we supporting?
Well, when
we're just cheering? Yay!
Well, no.
What are we doing?
Okay, so when you say that some...
So you saw Dinesh D'Souza put his foot in his mouth. So he says that Israel is great at fighting Islam. They're great at it. And the U.S. is terrible. So the question is, then why they need the U.S.? Why the U.S.? If the U.S. is terrible at fighting Islam and Israel is so great, then why does Israel need the U.S.? What he said don't make any sense. So that means that they don't need us. Based on what he just said, they don't need the U.S. So everybody also says that if U.S. doesn't help Israel, they'll be conquered by Iran. Now, keep in mind, they got all the technology. They got the Iron Dome. They had everything. They got nukes. Israel has everything, but they would not be able to defeat Iran. Why not? If they're so good at fighting the Muslims, why would Israel not be able to defeat Iran with a clear military advantage? And so Andrew says, so then why are we supporting them then? They don't need us. And again, the argument is, why should Christians support Israel? Dinesh D'Souza keeps skipping that topic and going to the secular reason as to why. That's not the argument. The argument is from a theological standpoint, why should Christians support Israel? That's what he's asking. Dinesh D'Souza is bringing up politics, geopolitics, and everything else.
Somebody is morally if I were to say to you, you know what? You've got a kid who lives in a really bad neighborhood. A lot of bad guys out to kill your kid. You're morally obligated to support your kid. It doesn't follow that you have to buy your kid a house, buy him a gun. You might practice tough love on the kid. You might tell the kid, you better cut this shit out. You might have all kinds of instructions that the kid will oppose. Sure. You will also accept that your interests and the kid's interests will sometimes diverge. So I'm admitting all of this with regard to Israel. I'm simply saying that the obligation to support is generic. It doesn't specify give them 3.8 billion. Let me ask you this.
Well, hang on. I want to use this analogy. I want to use this analogy real quick, because let's go back to your analogy. I think it's fine.
Okay.
You say, hey, there's like a mom and her son, or a dad and the son, and they're in a rough
and
neighborhood.
You're saying the son is a heretic. He doesn't go to church.
No. You say, hey, there's a moral obligation for you to get your son out of this neighborhood. And then you give a bunch of qualifiers. Dinesh says, that means, maybe you tell him to stop doing this, or maybe you take this action, or maybe you take that action, or you do, blah, blah, blah. But the whole point of this is to say that there's a moral obligation there with a must, ought, do something in order to prevent this from happening to their son, right?
Right.
Okay, great. What's that with Israel?
So our interests and Israel's interests diverge on many points. Israel would like right now for the United States to go all the way, pulverize Lebanon, have regime change in Iran. Trump is saying no.
Yeah.
This is a recognition where we are saying our interest is the same as yours insofar as pulverizing Iran and breaking its military back. Once we have done that.
But he just said that Israel are experts at fighting Islam. He just said that the United States is terrible at fighting Islam or Islamic extremists. So my question is, why do they need the U.S. to do all this stuff with Iran if they're the experts? Shouldn't you understand what I'm saying? Because it's the U.S. military doing this stuff. It's the U.S. military doing this. So if we're so bad at doing it, why are we doing it? It doesn't make any sense. And Andrew Willson asked the question again, okay, well, what's the moral argument?
And stop the nuclear possibilities. We're ready to quit. We're ready to go home. If you want to continue, you can.
This is just gibberish, dude. Where do we get to the moral ought? Where do we? You still haven't given me You have a moral
Now-
obligation, like that mom does, to move the kid out of that rough neighborhood with all of those bad guys. Wouldn't I just use that analogy and say, okay, great, then we have an obligation to move 10 million Jews among the Western nations to get them out of the neighborhood of the bad guys?
And that would be your solution?
No, I'm saying if I'm using your analogy
But,
for the
well-
obligation, wouldn't you say that the mom should move the kid out of the neighborhood?
The
with the
analogy,
mom?
the analogy was intended to clarify the meaning of what does it mean to have a moral obligation to support. No analogy travels on all fours.
I
So
agree.
if I say, okay, I'm going to get my kid out of the bad neighborhood, it may be that I decide, okay, the kid can stay there, but I need to help with providing security. Or I need to make sure that I go visit every week to make sure that the apartment isn't being wrecked.
But where does the moral obligation here come in for the United States,
It
sovereign
comes to-
nation,
it
and
comes
the
to the-
Christians inside of it specifically? That's what we're talking about. The Christians. Where does their obligation come in to help the Jews in Israel do fucking anything? Where's the obligation for that? Where?
Well,
What?
do you agree that the Iranian regime and the forces of Islam in the region are evil?
Sure.
Okay.
I believe that their ideology.
Their ideology is
Here,
evil.
let's
And
do
would
this.
Israel,
Yeah.
in fighting to change, clean up, remake, transform the Middle East and produce. Hold on.
Hang on. I got to clarify one thing.
Yeah.
Just the terms. When you say evil, for me, evil, the doing of evil would be moving away from participating in the energies of God and Jesus Christ. That's how I would differentiate what evil is from good. Good would be participating in those energies. So when you say the ideology of Islam, you don't believe Arabs are evil, right?
No.
You believe Islam, the ideology is evil, right?
Right.
Okay, Jews, from my perspective, that ideology is also evil.
Right, but I think we're talking about evil in two completely different senses. There is a
How?
sense in which heresy is evil, right? Because
Yeah.
it departs from the theological straight path. In fact, orthodoxy means a straight path.
Uh-huh.
Heresy means a deviation.
Sure.
We're talking about evil in a more natural law sense, by which I mean
I don't
things
believe
like admitting that Jewish theology is a heresy, or at least
And that is evil.
is conditionally handed back over.
He just
Does
punishes
God ever
the hell
say
out
that in
of
the
them.
Bible?
He just punishes them. No, I'm
He-
not.
Worship the golden calf. I'm taking back all my promises to Abraham. Give me the land back because I never gave it to you unconditionally. I gave it to you conditionally, handed back over.
He just
Does
punishes
God ever
the hell
say that
out
in
of
the
them.
Bible?
He just punishes them. No, I'm
He-
not making that claim.
And Israel has
You're
been
just-
punished.
You're just putting words in my mouth. Again, back to the ethical claim. None of this even matters. It's completely irrelevant to what you're even talking about.
Why is it irrelevant?
I'll tell you why. This is
You
hilarious.
think the character of God is
You
irrelevant
said
to our discussion of good and evil?
You made the claim that God will use evil for good. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. You agree with that. Then why do we assume that he's going to use the evil ideology of the Jew for good, but not the Muslim?
Well, God may well.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I want to repeat that question because I want you to answer it.
I'm answering it.
Why should we assume that it's only Jewish people who we both agree hold an evil ideology instead of Muslims who we agree hold an evil ideology that God won't use them for good? Why do we just instantly assume it's only going to use Jewish people for good?
Well, number one, we are fallible people in the world. So we have to look and make judgments. It is possible to argue, for example, someone might say, due to the fact that America has become like Sodom and Gomorrah, God used 9/11 as a form of divine punishment on America, right? You could make that argument.
Yeah,
It's a very speculative type of argument.
I agree.
Yeah. And so I
So
wouldn't,
is the
wouldn't
argument
make
that
it, but
God's
in
going to use
theory,
Jews to do good.
in theory, it's not impossible.
Speculative. That's a speculative argument to say God's going to use this evil ideology to do good. That's your argument.
So my argument was not, quote, God is using the Jews who are evil to do good. My
No, with an
argument
evil
was a
ideology.
refutation. Hold on. Let's be really clear.
Okay.
You basically were saying these are bad people and they are outside of God's purposes. And I said many times God uses people, even people who have completely rejected him, as his instruments for his divine purposes.
Like Muslims.
He's done it repeatedly. Now,
Like Muslims?
Now, I don't deny that in principle, God could use the Indians, the Muslims, the Chinese. Yes, God can use those
That's
people.
the whole point, man.
What's
You
the point
just
of
are
what?
defaulting for some reason to say only this specific people group who I think holds an evil ideology, which you did say, that people group
Well-
God's going to use for good. These other people groups. So
Well,
you're asking
first
us
of
to
all-
pick.
So Andrew Wilson brings up a great point. He brings up a great point. He says that the argument is that Dinesh D'Souza said God will use evil for good. Let's say we all agree with that. So Andrew Wilson is saying, well, that can work both ways. That God can use the evil, the rejection of Christ by Jews for good. He can also use the Muslims for good as well. So he's basically making an argument for both. He's saying that if his example was that God, you could say from an example that God punished America with 9/11, say for example. But also the argument could be made that God is punishing the Jews with Iran. You can make the argument on both sides. You're just picking which one you want to use. So Dinesh D'Souza opened this can of worms up, but again, most of the time, you never even get this far in the debate because they call you anti-Semite. And this is what I mean by why they even had the term in the first place. The term is to shut down these kind of conversations because no one wants an intellectual look at what's actually being done. I'm just going to say, you can support who you want to support, but to say that someone is obligated to support something is, I don't agree with that because the Bible doesn't support that. Theological Handyman said, did God use Pharaoh for good in Exodus? Yes, he did. So that's the point though. The point is that something can be used for good on both sides. See, we always assume that it's the bad for the Jews, but it could be the bad of the Jews for the rest of the world. How do we not know that God's using the bad of the Jews for the rest of the world to come to Christ? Why is that never a point that's looked at? Because that's what I said earlier, evil is evil. So you could use evil on either side, the Jewish side or the Muslim side or the American side. Combat Medic said, Israel in the Bible is not a physical place. These people are using the Bible to take over the world, and they don't believe Christ is the Savior. I don't know why that's so funny. I don't know why that's so funny to me. I don't know why that made me. I don't know why that's so funny. Tierra said, Dinesh hasn't quoted one Bible verse. Exactly. Not a single one. But he's arguing that Christians need to support Israel. But he had to use the Bible one time.
You're asking us to pick an interest between two evil ideologies.
But the reason why he hasn't done it is because if he brings up the Bible, then he's going to have to, then they're going to have debate on the scripture. So he's trying to stay away from the Bible and focus on a more secular argument and a more, I guess, moral argument. Because, if he opens up that Bible, he's going to have a whole different can of worms to deal with.
We can choose which ideology we prefer because you think that God's going to prefer that we prefer one of those evil ideologies.
Well,
Dinesh.
first of all,
that's the reduction of your logic.
First of all, you're arguing as if there is no connection between God the Father. I mean, if you look at the Christian Bible, you could almost say that
Magic Jew blood.
Hold on. You could almost say that the Old Testament is the biography of God the Father, the Gospels are the biography of God the Son, and the Acts are the biography of God the Holy Spirit. This is the Trinity right there. And this is the historical unfolding of the Trinity in the Christian story. And now you're pretending like there is no relationship between Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, God the Father, And the Jews?
Are you
Is that what you're
pretending
saying?
that there's no relationship between God the Father and Christians?
Yes. No, I'm saying
No, it's
that
really what's hilarious here.
No,
and
I'm saying-
we can
I'm
break it
saying-
down. Hang on, we'll break it down. I'll break it down with you. I'll go right along with
Okay.
you.
Would you
Jews
agree?
have magic Jew blood? Yes or no?
Have what?
Magic Jew blood, so they're preferred by God?
Well, God isn't picking based on magic Jew blood. God is picking based upon a particular community
Uh-huh.
that is built
How-
around a set
community.
of divine instructions, rights, laws, commandments,
Does this
prophets.
particular community have a specific DNA by chance?
Sure.
Got it. So, and we could trace that through their blood, right? So you would basically just say that people who have this particular blood are favored by God.
Well, no more. I mean, you could make the same argument about Christians. Christians
Right.
have DNA.
Exactly. So, and
Right,
I would
but-
make the argument, I would make that exact argument about Christians. What's kind of hilarious here, as we're kind of moving through this, we're finding out that one, you still have no moral ought for why it is that Christians are supposed to support Jews or Israel. Haven't heard a single argument.
Well, that's because
not one.
you're-
And by the way,
That's because you're setting a standard where I am a Christian monk sitting on a sacred pillar in the Himalayas,
Uh-huh.
and you're now asking me, give me a reason to support Israel.
yeah,
I'm talking about Christians living in the world
yeah.
where we recognize that in the world, there's a lot of admixture of good and evil. And there might be good people in an Islamic world, but the Islamic ideology is bad. There might be good people
The
in
Jewish
Iran
ideology
right
is
now.
also bad by your own admission.
Jewish theology is bad. Judaism isn't, quote, an ideology. Judaism is a theology, and I agree.
Where do you get your ideology from?
Well,
your
what I-
theology.
Well, what
you
I was
know who
getting
said
at,
that? You in your book.
well,
You in your own book said
I
that.
said a little minute ago, and you agreed that Islam is a comprehensive ideology that includes family law, divorce, honor killing, Sharia. Judaism is not an ideology in that sense. It is not trying to create a sort of comprehensive supervision over the world.
Except
Islam
its own
is.
state. Its own state.
It doesn't
with its
do
own
it in
laws?
Israel. Israel doesn't have. When is the last time you heard, for example, of Jews being stoned for adultery, like in the Old Testament?
Oh,
Happens
not
all the
in
time.
forever. Not in forever.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
So, in other words, there's a big difference. In Islam, you still do get stoned. You
Yeah,
get thrown
sure.
out of windows.
Sure.
You get killed by your own family members. You get killed for leaving
But
the religion.
nobody's making a dispute there.
I want to invite you to a free trading and investing workshop right here in Cobb County that will forever change.
The dispute that we have is whether or not
Yeah, and so the
Christians
point I
have
was
any
making-
obligation to morally
Okay.
to support Israel
All
or
right.
support Jews who you, by your own admission, you say is an evil ideology.
And I was saying that Israel, against that ideology, is doing a lot of good. If there's a ring of pedophiles and a cop decides, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to beat the shit out of all these people and I'm going to save all these kids, you go, wait a minute, isn't the cop a Jew? And I'm like, yeah. And you're like, well, isn't
What?
he a heretic? Doesn't he have the wrong ideology? Shouldn't we be rejecting him as much as the pedophiles? Dinesh, why are you making arguments for the lesser evil?
This is backwards. It would be like
How is it
it would be
backwards?
like-
I'm saying
it
that
would be like
Israel.
a cop who was also a pedophile beat the shit out of 10 pedophiles.
How is the cop?
And I'm like, okay, that's
We just
right on,
agree.
pedophile cop who beat.
Wait
up
a minute.
pedophiles. Like, what are you talking about?
So
It's like an
pedophilia.
evil ideology. You make me want to pick and choose, but why? Why should I support either? And by the way, I never take any of this personally. We have different ideologies that we're fighting for, slightly at least, but we have a lot of overlap too. And for that, I thank you. It's never personal for me. With that said, I kicked your ass in this debate bad because you never established a single moral ought or reason why it is that Christians have an obligation to support Jews or Israel. In fact, I got a lot out of you here I was not expecting. You claim that Judaism is itself an evil ideology because it's in heresy. You also claim that Islam is an evil ideology as it's in heresy, which is exactly my position. I believe those two things as well. And we both established another fact we can agree on, that ethnic Jews nor Arabs are evil because they're ethnic Jews or Arab. That's ridiculous on its face. So we can make this ideological distinction immediately. The problem that we have is that I think due to your bad theology, which I'm happy to tangle with you in a different debate on the theological aspects of this, it's led you down this road where you seem to believe, for some reason, there's this ambiguous moral reason why there's an ought or a must for why it is that we must support Judaism or we must support Israel, this secular state, which you agreed was a secular state, and you also agree, well, it also has religious Jews in it, and those religious Jews who are in it, they're following an evil ideology, and the secular state itself is part of an evil ideology because it's secular. We never got to the establishment of the ought. Now, I will give some credit to Dinesh. He had the harder position to defend, and usually that's me. So credit where it's due. It's a much harder position to defend that there is some moral obligation versus saying that there's not. So credit where credit's due. But honestly, my friend, you just never established one. And we tried and tried and tried and tried. Most of your analogies got turned back on you. Basically, every hypothetical you had got turned back on you, and your reasoning was shown to be completely fallacious.
Um,
Most people miss this, but it's the turning point.
Israel is surrounded by Islamic fanatics.
No shit.
Yes. It's like saying, I have a ranch. I'm surrounded by outlaws who want to burn down my ranch. And you go, well, why don't you then give up your homeland, give up your ranch? You're obviously safer if you move somewhere else. And I'm like, no, this actually is my homeland. I have every right to be here.
You're absolutely 100,000% correct. I have outlaws. They're all around my little ranch, right? It's my ranch. I got the deed. I'm fighting for that shit. Do I have a right to go over to my neighbor and demand that he help?
No.
No, wait, what?
Hold on.
Huh?
Hold on.
Wait, what?
Well,
did you say no?
I said by itself, no. If your
By
ranch,
itself, no.
yeah.
Most people miss this, but it's the turning point.
Israel is surrounded by Islamic fanatics.
No shit.
Yes. It's like saying, I have a ranch. I'm surrounded by outlaws who want to burn down my ranch. And you go, well, why don't you then give up your homeland, give up your ranch? You're obviously safer if you move somewhere else. And I'm like, no, this actually is my homeland. I have every right to be here.
You're absolutely 100,000% correct. I have outlaws. They're all around my little ranch, right? It's my ranch. I got the deed. I'm fighting for that shit. Do I have a right to go over to my neighbor and demand that he help?
No.
No, wait, what?
Hold on.
Huh?
Hold on.
Wait, what?
Well,
did you say no?
I said by itself, no. If you're
Yo, I'll pay for you.
I had some more good clips, but Theological Handyman said no one won the debate, neither could prove anything either way in Scripture because Scripture doesn't speak on it. This was literally a secular argument that is not found in Scripture. Well, I think the issue is that because it's not found in Scripture, you're making a secular argument for the support. And I think the issue is saying, on one hand, you say, okay, it's political. And on the other hand, you say it's because of the Bible. So the problem is when we have the discussion, they conflate both things. That's why Andrew was trying to say, give me the Christian argument for why there needs to be support for Israel. And I don't think Dinesh D'Souza could do it, which is why he stayed away from it. But I think just from a more practical sense, in my opinion, a lot of this stuff leads to a bad theology because you have to put Christ on the back burner. And this is what I mean when I say that. I say that the Bible is very clear on who Christ is and what we are to do. That's what's clear. Who Christ is and what we are to do is very clear in the Bible. Now, we can say that the support for Israel isn't in there, but we do know what is in there. And what is in there is us following after Christ. The problem is that you're dealing with a nation that rejects Christ. So there's going to be a conflict of interest somewhere. The only way there isn't a conflict of interest is because you're not bringing up Christ. So to keep the conflict down, you put Christ on the back burner. because first and foremost, salvation should be on everybody's mind. Salvation should be the number one thing for Muslims, for Jews, for anybody. It should be salvation. So if we're dealing with the nation and we're saying that they're God's chosen people, then that puts us in the realm of us putting Christ first with them. But that's not what happens. What happens is if we say that they're God's chosen people, but we're not going to bring up Jesus. They're God's chosen people, but we're not going to bring up salvation. They're God's chosen people, but we're not going to bring up them rejecting Christ. You know what I'm saying? So you can't have it both ways. You can't say they're God's chosen people, which is you're saying that according to the Bible, and then turn around and say, well, we're going to stay away from Christ on this. No, it's not how that works. If you're going to use the Bible, use the Bible. If you don't use the Bible, don't use the Bible. Because you can make a secular argument for supporting Israel without the Bible. But once you start conflating the two, once you start saying that they are God's chosen people, that they have magical Jew blood and all of this stuff, then you bring in the Christ element. And so what's happened is that they're using the Bible, they're using Christ being a Jew as a shield to not deal with what are we really doing. And that's the issue here. That's why Andrew was telling him, give me the biblical reason as to why Christians need to support Israel. But Dinesh D'Souza couldn't. He can only bring up secular ones. Why? Because you can't bring up a biblical one because the nation openly rejects Christ. Now, I want to see something else. Let me look up. How many Americans support Israel? Public support in Israel, public support of Israel, United States, is 36% to 46%. A Gallup poll said, let me see. Okay. So Republicans, let's just say Republicans says 58 to 70% support Israel. Let's say 80% of Democrats hold unfavorable views of Israel. 66% state the U.S. backs Israel too much. Independents, 30% with Israel. So I think, let me see. Let's go with the Pew Research. Let's see what Pew Research says. Pew Research states that 60% of U.S. 60% of U.S. adults have an unfavorable view of Israel, up from 53% last year. 59% had little or no confidence in Netanyahu to do the right thing regarding world affairs, up from 52% last year. In both political parties, majorities of adults under the age of 50 now rate Israel and Netanyahu negatively. So this survey was conducted in March of this year. And so Americans' views of Israel, Netanyahu have turned more negative. Percentage of, I guess, views on Benjamin Netanyahu. America's views on Israel are sharply divided by party and age. So we see that Yeah. So Republicans, older Republicans, support Israel a lot more. Okay, so this survey, and it's the Pew Research survey, and I'm gonna put the link in the bio. But so there is a difference between supporting what Israel is doing politically versus supporting Israelis having the right to exist. There is a difference between supporting Benjamin Netanyahu politically and you saying that Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't have the right to exist. We are conflating two different things. Being critical of Israeli foreign policy and the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu is not the same as not wanting them to exist as a people. What has happened is that those two things have been conflated. So if you disagree with the Israeli government and the Israeli and Benjamin Netanyahu, then that means you disagree with Israel, period. And it's not the same. That's why even asking these questions have to be asked in context, because the survey question should be, do you believe that Israel should exist? I guarantee the majority of people will say yes. Do you agree that the Jews should have a homeland? The majority of folks are going to agree. Do you believe that Jews as a people should exist? The majority of folks are going to agree. So my point is that when they're asking these questions, they're trying to get a political answer and take that answer and say that you don't want the Jews to exist. It's very disingenuous. It's very disingenuous, and it's just wrong to do. Because what you're really saying is that you have to support every and anything Jewish 100%. And that's done with nothing. If you ask Americans about Trump, they're going to be critical of Trump. They're going to be critical of the American government. So think about it. The American people being polled here are critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and critical of Trump. They're critical of the Israeli government and the American government. So what does the survey really prove? The survey proves that Americans are skeptical of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, American government, and Israeli government. But they're trying to use a report to show anti-Semitism, and it doesn't. It just shows that Americans have opinions that aren't favorable of the American government and Trump and the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu. That's all it proved. But what it doesn't prove is anti-Semitism. That's what it doesn't prove. I thought it was a good debate. Hold on. Let me see. Thank you, Cruise Missile, for the super sticker. Thank you again, sir. And thank you one more time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Always supporting. Thank you so much. JV Chanel said, I'd argue just as bad propaganda-wise for evangelicals to disavow supporting Israel as it is for obligaties to disconnect themselves from libertarian theology. I'd argue it's just as bad propaganda-wise for evangelicals to disavow supporting Israel as it is for obligaties to disconnect themselves from a liberation theology. I don't get that. Can you explain that to me? Thrice says, sadly, Christians said to build Zion only to realize they are building Babylon. Oh, okay, I got you. They're both being badly propagandized. Yeah, it is. Yes, both of them. It's still, yeah, on both sides. And that's what I would argue. But I thought it was a good debate. I thought Dinesh D'Souza, I think he's a great debater. I think that he brought up good points from a non-biblical sense, like a secular sense, I think he brought up good points. But I think Andrew Willson won a debate because Dinesh D'Souza could not answer his question. But I think Andrew Willson really challenged his beliefs and kind of poked holes in a lot of them, just based on the fact that really the premise of what Dinesh D'Souza is saying is that the Jews are chosen. He didn't want to say it, but that's what the premise is, that the Jews are chosen. So you're supposed to support them. And that's really it in a nutshell. They're chosen. Now, I don't have anything against anybody. I like Dinesh D'Souza and I like them both. But yeah, I just think it's bad. I think Zionism is bad theology. Just like J.V. Chanel said, just like liberation theology is. I think anytime we start adding outside things to the word of God, it's going to be problematic. Anyway, listen, I love y'all and I'll see y'all soon. Thank y'all so much. Thank you.